Welcome everyone to the Portland Utility Board's first meeting of April. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and the public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people who are made vulnerable by systemic inequity. And that means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. And the way that we do that is we speak up and we speak out. Each person on this board is empowered to maintain the culture of the utility board, and we will focus on the individual or population, the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct, not the person.
Hi, my name is Amy Archer Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, who you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by me, so please limit to technical and logistical issues, including if you wish to sign up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and have not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. I may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, public can raise your hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking if desired. It is not required. Please mute your microphone when not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. As mentioned, public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with me or raise your hand during the period. It's also available just prior to a board vote after it's been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this is being recorded. I'll pass it back.
So thank you, Amy. So today's agenda, time permitting, we will have a brief update on the Natural Resources Committee from Bob. And then the main portion of the conversation today will be an update on the Portland Water Bureau's filtration project. That will be a presentation and hopeful discussion. And then we're going to round out the meeting, working on our continued budget recommendations that we will be hopefully sending to the bureaus and council. So with that, let's go on to the disclosure of communications. All right, I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand or unmuting, so we can continue on to the next portion. All right, so now is the public comment portion. Amy, has anyone submitted written testimony beforehand?
I do not have written testimony, but I did receive a request to give public comment prior to the meeting. I'm not sure if they're in the room, but Charlie Cieco or Chico, if you're in the room, you can unmute and begin speaking. And if Charlie is not in the room, I also had a message from a Terry Cieco or Cieco, if you are in the room. I have not received any requests by chat, and I have not seen anybody respond. So we'll just go with who's in the room. So we can go with the first hand raised. John Sealing.
Sure. Thanks for letting me speak. My comment with regards to this entire project is, and really just focused on one thing that I think a lot of us have concern about is public safety, maintenance of the roads, repair of the roads out here. We've obviously got not only rural residents here, but we've got a significant amount of agricultural traffic, school traffic, et cetera, et cetera. What I've never seen in the presentations, at least to my satisfaction, from PWB with regards to the filtration plant, are their specific plans on how to mitigate the impact their vehicles will have, the thousands of truck runs that are going to be done here. I've heard stories, and maybe they're wrong, maybe they're right, with regards to if there's an emergency in the area, that they just need a 20-minute heads up to remove steel plates from the road, which is wholly inadequate. So, my comment here is that I hope the PUB looks at and demands more accountability, but for mitigation, or at least a plan for mitigation on the road impact for us out here in East Multnomah County. Thank you.
Thank you for that, John. Anyone else who's present in the room want to raise their hand for the public comment portion? All right, I'm not seeing any. So then we will move along.
I did
go ahead.
receive one via chat, so I will share this on behalf of the individual. I don't know their name. It is somebody who's connecting by phone. They stated that they are concerned about the outlandish cost to ratepayers from $300 million when the project was approved to almost $2 billion now and growing. When will it stop? Almost all of the Water Bureau's wholesale customers are leaving by 2026, resulting in a 30% ratepayer loss. This makes it more expensive for the remaining ratepayers. And that is the end of the comment that was provided.
And thank you for that public comment. Last call. Anyone else have a comment to share? All right, so with that, let's move to the next portion. All right, so we had a natural resources service delivery project team come together. Bob, are you available to give us an update on the first meeting that was held a week or so ago?
Sure. We had that pre-meeting, then we had the first meeting. It was without bureau directors, with a lot of staff. It was pretty well attended. I was the only one there on behalf of the pub, but basically we had a discussion, kind of an overview, and some discussion about what our goal actually was, which is not entirely clear. And so I think there was a fairly robust discussion around, where are we trying to get to? And if we're just developing a process, we've been here several times before. We're now kind of in the fourth incarnation of this discussion since it began, and we're still doing a process for a process. So that was most of the meeting, and then we did an exercise where we put sticky notes up on boards thinking about some of the issues that people wanted to raise. So I think fairly preliminary at this point. And I think I would say I still have some questions of really what is a good question to ask us and what is it? What is a staff decision? I think that was probably the most interesting part of the conversation for me, which is if you're asking sort of us, how do you organize yourselves within the bureaus? Which positions go where, and should you have a unit in this area or that area? I'm not sure that any of us are qualified to really answer that question. That's really about internal organization and what makes sense. If you ask us what should they do, what do we want out of a natural resource bureau? What are they doing now? What would we like them to do? How would we like them to intersect with the public? What kinds of goals should they prioritize? I think that's a great question for the public. And I think the challenge for us is to tease those out. And at least I was trying to kick some of it back to staff and saying, look, we can't tell you which bureau a position should be in per se, or which bureau a program should be in, or whether they should all be consolidated or some of them should be. We all have our perspectives, but at some point that really is for you all, city staff, bureau directors, and so on, to sort out among yourselves. Because to some degree, we're making it up as we go, so that's where we're at. I think some good preliminary questions were teed up, and I think the next meetings will probably be pretty interesting.
Thank you for that, Bob. And do you or Amy know when the next meeting is scheduled?
I think I do. Go on, and I'll see if I can find it. I'll cut back in if I can find it.
Thank you. And yeah, just send it in chat if you could.
Sure.
All right. So with that brief update, I think we can move to our first part of the agenda today, which is the Portland Water Bureau's update on their water filtration project. So I would just like to welcome Jody Inman, the Chief Engineer at the Portland Water Bureau. Thank you for coming, Jody.
Thank you for having us, and good afternoon. I'm going to try sharing the presentation, so bear with me because it's not the same location as it is on Teams. All right, so I need need approval to start sharing.
Apologies, you should be able to now.
Okay. Right, can you all see that?
We can, although it's not in full view, so it's kind of shrunk down.
There it's on. All right.
There we go.
Did we get there? All right, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you all this afternoon. I'm going to give you an update on the status of the Bull Run treatment projects, and then also an update on what we are bringing to council next week, the afternoon of April 10th. So I just talked about the agenda, but we're going to talk a little bit, do a brief overview of filtration, the requirements, the benefits, some of the workforce components. We're going to touch on cost, and we're going to confirm and explicitly discuss what is coming to council, what the specific actions are that will be coming to council next week, which include our guaranteed maximum prices for the second phases of the work for the facility and the pipelines, as well as our annual report. So I just wanted to take this moment to sort of reflect back on the importance and the legacy of the system that the Water Bureau customers, our community, both residential, business, and our single family customers currently enjoy, in that between the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Portland Water Bureau, the Portland Water Committee was created. They spent a lot of time investing in a long-term investment. They didn't just choose the fast and easy resource of tapping into the Willamette River. They chose to look long-term to build a system that would benefit all customers for a very long period of time. They chose to go up into the, go 25 miles east of town, look for a protected watershed, build that 25 miles of infrastructure to connect to that watershed. And then since then, they have spent centuries working to ensure that there are protections in place through the federal government to ensure that there's no logging, there's no liquidation, and that watershed remains protected for its ability to continue to deliver clean, clear, and safe drinking water. we as part leaders have.
Can I interrupt just for a moment? I've had a message from a couple folks who said that it's kind of hard to hear and understand you. So I'm just wondering if you can just move a little closer to the microphone while you're
So I
speaking. Thank you.
apologize for my face getting big, but I will try to talk loudly and articulate something we have from today. Anyway, we have been, the Portland community and those who drink Portland water have really been benefiting from that legacy for generations. We are at a point in our time where we have the opportunity to make a similar level of investment that will give that same legacy to the future generations, to our children and our children's children, to be able to have that security of access to clean, pure, and safe drinking water from the watershed that so many before us have done so much to protect. So just to touch on the Bull Run filtration treatment program and what is in it, there are multiple components that are part of the Bull Run filtration and treatment project. That includes the facility itself, that is a 135 million gallon conventional treatment facility. It also includes 7 miles of large diameter seismically designed pipeline. That is pipeline that is currently in some of that pipeline is some of the worst condition of our conduits in the system. It is also pipeline that would be replaced as part of our seismic implementation program, which we will be endeavoring to embark upon, which we've started. So there are a lot of components within the treatment program itself. In addition to those two pieces, it also includes the corrosion control facility, which was a $20 million investment that was made, that was brought online and has been successfully helping to reduce the exposure of lead at the customer's cabin since it was brought online 2 years ago in 2022. So I think sometimes we talk a lot about just the filtration facility itself. Again, it's 135 million gallon MGD per day facility. It is on a 95-acre parcel in East Multnomah County that is owned and was purchased for this purpose in 1975 by the Portland Water Bill. But again, it's a facility and it's also an extensive system investment with a large network of large diameter seismically using pipe, which we don't currently. So one of the pieces to remember with filtration is a regulatory requirement. There's a lot of words on the slide, but what we really want to mention is that we had a variance to treatment for cryptosporidium that in 2017, it was revoked because we had too many cryptosporidium hits in our watershed. As part of that process, we need to enter into a compliance agreement with the Oregon Health Authority for how we were going to address cryptosporidium because our variance was no longer a viable alternative. At that point in time, the city council struggled and took a lot of time to really think about the impacts and the types of treatment that were available for cryptosporidium, including UV. They recognized the costs for UV were more. They recognized that the cost of filtration were more, but the benefits that filtration provided far exceeded the one thing that UV could help us do, which was treat or disinfect from cryptosporidium. And then per that, once that council made the decision in the summer of 2017 to go with filtration over UV because of the additional benefits, that decision was used to enter into a bilateral compliance agreement with Oregon Health Authority. This is not just a general agreement or a contract. This is a legal requirement for us to build filtration. So in 2017, the consideration of benefits and costs was made, a decision was made by City Council, and we are now legally required to build filtration. As part of that bilateral compliance agreement, it specifically states that cost is not a reason for a revisiting of the compliance agreement. So it is, we do not have the ability to renegotiate the terms of that bilateral compliance agreement. Part of the reason in 2017 why we all believe that the choice to make a filtration was the right one is because filtration is not a one-trick pony. is. Filtration provides multiple benefits to our customers that will set us up to be able to address events that are happening and are seen today for long into the future. Filtration will give us the ability to deal with climate change, in that it gives us the ability to deal with increased turbidity or sediment getting into our water system. It will allow us a response tool in case of a forest fire. In 2017, right before when the council was debating the decision to go to filtration, we had a forest fire, the Eagle Creek fire, which was on the edge of our watershed. That was a reminder of how fragile our watershed is and how critical it is to our ability to serve our customers. In last fall, in 2023, we had a worse event. We actually had a fire in our watershed within a couple of miles of our Headwood Street facility. We were extremely fortunate. We had a lot of help in the response from the Forest Service and nationwide and local communities as well. In fighting that fire, we had a lot of help from the weather, but it has really demonstrated the risk and increasing risk of a forest fire in our watershed, which really, even if we had EV, it would not be able to help. We would not deal with the additional sediments in the fire. And filtration is one of the other tools. There are other tools or other events or other risks out there that filtration helps us address. It helps us address potential algae. It helps us address turbidity from increased storm events, which we see with climate change. And it also will help remove organics from our water, which will require less disinfectant, which reduces the amount of chemical disinfection byproducts, which are cancer causing in our water. So why not switch to UV? Because this is a question that comes up a lot. Just to reiterate, switching to UV is no longer an option. We are under a compliance order from the Oregon Health Authority to build filtration. We made that decision in 2017 to go for the rate or to build a treatment tool that will allow us and our future generations to address the risks that we are seeing today and unknown risks that we may not see and we know are potentially coming. Filtration is not an if, it's a when. We are going to have to build it at some point, and so it is in our best interest to build it now when it is cheaper than it would be to build it in 20 years. If we built UV, we would remain an unfiltered status, which we can be problematic. So costs. So market conditions have impacted the costs across the country for water, wastewater, transportation, multiple other type of infrastructure improvements. Costs for this project, costs for the water treatment program are going up. From advocacy nationwide, cost averages from the estimate to the GMP are around 44%. The Portland Water Bureau filtration facility, which is still from the right, is about a 47% increase from the estimate to the GMP. This is a point where we are happy to be somewhat at the average, and we are delivering an excellent project with excellent participation from the community, and we are doing that at the average rate of increase in cost. What is driving this cost up? First, we're going to talk about water rate affordability. So with these increases in costs that are coming with the GMPs and an annual report to council next week, there will not be an additional increase to the rate forecast. We will be addressing the cost increases and we'll be staying at the maximum 8.1% that is in our current rate forecast. That includes about a third of the rate or a third of the bill going to maintaining our current service level. About a third of the bill will go to the build-up filtration projects, and about a third of the bill goes to capital programs or other capital work. So what are the key drivers that are driving up the cost? It's probably no surprise. One of the factors that is driving up the cost on this project is schedule compression. We had anticipated or hoped to be starting construction last fall. However, the land use process has taken longer than we had hoped, and we have just started or are starting construction now. That means that we have to get our end date remains the same. So we have had to compress the schedule for construction, which increases the cost for having multiple folks out on the site at the same time. Market capacity. This is probably one of the larger factors that has impacted the cost of the work. There is a lot of work going on in the market right now, not and including in the area. In addition, there is a lot of infrastructure funding coming from the federal government that is also pouring into infrastructure projects that are competing for a lot of the same contractors. So there's a question. I see one question in the chat. Is it possible to wait till it's the end? Or do you want to do that? All right, I'll keep going and then we'll come back to questions if that's okay. Another factor that really is driving up the cost is labor shortages. In the area between 2015 and 2020, the average unfilled construction worker job was about 200,000, or about 200,000 unfilled jobs. Since 2022, that number has increased to over 400,000. There is a general reduction in folks going into the construction trades, and yet we are seeing that with an increased demand for construction trade workers. That means that in order to get the qualified staff that we want to be working on these projects, we are having to pay folks more. And that is consistent across a lot of different service industries, and that does drive up the costs for all of the work. There is also continued escalation in supply chain issues. There was a pandemic that is part of what has driven up the costs by about 37%. In addition to that, there still continues to be supply chain and other issues. There are challenges with droughts in the Panama Canal. We have seen the Ukraine war and other worldwide conflicts that have made it really difficult, that have impacted supply chains, especially for things within foreign countries. So that is another component of the cost impact for construction. Proactive cost management. So we understand that this work is expensive, and we have been working to manage the costs since we started the project. We did a lot of value engineering through multiple of the early phases of design and reduced the estimated construction costs by over 200 million. We are looking for external funding wherever we can. We have obtained about 7,300 and expect to qualify for over 500,000 additional project energy efficiency related incentives from Energy Trust of Oregon. We have revised the 5-year, and in fact, we have revised the 10-year capital plan in order to be able to offset those cost increases. We continue to seek other external funding, and we are going to be applying for a second Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, or WIFIA loan, to help smooth the bill impacts over time. And then also maintaining momentum on construction is our best opportunity to achieve the compliance deadline and control cost increases. Construction escalation in recent years has been anywhere from 10 to 20%. If we assumed a 5% escalation, which would be low, we would be looking on the order of $80 million a year just in escalation, without any other impacts to the construction. For some happy news, we are very excited with the general and maximum price packages that we'll be bringing next week. We have exceptional COVID equity fund participation. For the facility itself, we have almost 300 million that is going to COVID-owned firms. So that is over 26% of the project or the facility that is going to COVID participation, which exceeds the 25% that is part of the regional workforce equity agreement, and far exceeds the 20% that was part of the old goal that we used to say. So this was a large project. We were concerned about how we were going to be able to achieve new, larger goals with the pure volume of this work. And the team was able to do that and exceed them. And I think our contracting community, while we've had a few stumbles along the way, will be there in support of this project with us next week. And they are very excited to start the work. Another key success in the COVID participation is the high percentage that is actually going to minority-owned firms. So that's 300 million on the facility itself. For pipelines, that also has a wonderful success story when it comes to COVID participation, with over 100 million going to the COVID community, and that equates to 34% of the total contract dollars. And again, for this project, we have exceptional minority business enterprise, minority businesses that are part of that COVID participation. Not only do we have large participation, the program and these projects have also incorporated some of our non-typical COVID forms. We typically see flagging and trucking are some of the ones that are more common on our type of infrastructure work. But we also have electrical, we have building, and we do have trucking, and we have erosion control. Those folks will all be participating on this project, which gives them the opportunity to grow their businesses, to be able to compete on other local areas, which is part of the intent of investing in the COVID firms. This project, we have been working to keep the community informed and engaged. We have multiple different avenues with which we try to reach the community about the project. We have specific efforts that we make with the community where the project will be occurring in this county. We have other communications that we do on the Water Bureau website, on the city website, and to the general ratepayer. As we move into construction, we will be also updating our engagement to have opportunities for the community to meet specifically with our contractors. We will have a construction hotline so that we are able to hear, identify, address, and mitigate concerns that come up as we move into construction. And then other methods for the community to be informed of what is going on the project. So what specifically is coming to council? We have 3 reports coming to council. The first is a report that's led by the Water Bureau, which is the Bull Run Treatment Project Standing Report. This is a report that in 2017 was established and required for the Portland Water Bureau to bring back the status of the Bull Run Treatment Program to City Council once a year. That is coming back to council next Wednesday. We also have 2 additional reports to council. A report to council for the filtration guaranteed maximum price 2, or the balance of the work, as well as a report to council for the pipelines guaranteed maximum price 2. You may or may not remember, but when we went to council last year, we received authority to not only grant the notice to proceed for early work in our GMP1 packages, but also the authority to come back to council after we had gone out to bid to request approval for a report to grant the guaranteed maximum price 2. That is, those 2 packages will be led by procurement, will be part of the overall presentation. All of those reports are something that the city council will have the opportunity to ask questions on and vote on.
Excuse me, it's getting really garbled again.
Well, that was the end, so sorry.
Sorry about that.
If there's a piece, so I'm open to questions. I'm gonna get this out of my full screen because I can't see everybody, or if you can just let me know who the questions are.
And I think Karen Williams had the first question. Go ahead, Karen.
So my question is pretty basic. It's about, so if I understand one of those, or the earlier slides with the green and blue bar chart with the 47%. So I'm first of all, I just want to make sure I'm interpreting that correctly. So does that mean that the guaranteed maximum price is not quite twice what was originally estimated?
The total project cost of that 47%.
Okay, okay. So yeah, so it's not quite, all right. So 100%, I guess, would be if it had doubled. So it hasn't quite doubled, but it's still a lot. So I am just grappling with how, given that very large increase, how is it possible that the forecast, that the planned rate increases could cover that? You know, yeah.
So these increases are included in the rate forecast as well as the upcoming operational components of the operational piece. The cost of operating the plant is also in the rate forecast. When we do our rate forecasting, we go beyond 10 years. And so we have been tracking this, and this was part of the consideration when we did the last rate increase. So we are able to accommodate this increase through the cost offsets in that 10-year capital plan. So it is already in the rates that we took to council and or something. Did that answer the question?
Right, Jody, if I may, I would add that as we what we have also done, Karen, is to looked at the 10-year capital plan and make adjustment to accommodate for the increase that we're experiencing in this project. And we're also going to be pursuing a second WIFIA loan on the additional amount that is increasing, so that you know, WIFIA funds up to 49% of the project. So 49% of the increase, we're hoping that will be funded with a second WIFIA loan. And with a WIFIA loan, the repayment of that loan comes many years after the completion of the project. So in the near term, and when I say near term, because we look so far out, over the next 5 years, our rate forecast is not expected to change as a result.
Karen Williams again, can I do a quick follow-up to that?
Yeah.
So is the rest of that sort of the second sentence that comes after that, Cecilia, is that, but after 5 years, that's when we would see, I guess, the cost, you know, I mean, we have to pay for that increase in cost somehow. And I guess I'm understanding that that might not show up in the next 5 years, but it will show up eventually, right?
Yes, and as Jody indicated, we have been planning for this project over, you know, over a long period of time. So, you know, with the first WIFIA loan, we have already incorporated that repayment. We are making changes to the capital plan so that our issuance of revenue bonds to support the capital program will not be changing significantly. So it's, in essence, as far as our revenue bonds to be issued to fund the project and the rest of the capital plan will remain roughly the same. So the impact on the rates from that will not be there. And then you're correct, with the WIFIA loan, you know, starting later in the forecast, we are seeing increase to the rates. We are projecting that rates will come down. So we're able to absorb sort of the additional cost or the additional increase from the WIFIA loan. And then, of course, we're able to smooth that impact over a much longer period as well.
Did you have any follow-up to that, Karen?
No, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And we did have a community member submit a question asking, what is today's estimated cost for the project?
So the estimated, go ahead, Gabe.
Oh, thanks. So we're putting all of those specific numbers together for the council presentation. So we can share those as soon as that's been filed and ready to go for the council. So we're happy to share it. Just need to get that all into the council first.
So you don't have the ability to give us an estimate before that's reported to council?
Well, we've been asked to deliver the information to council. So we're putting that final piece together this week, and then it'll be out at council. So if there is anything that's been filed before then, we will get that to you, and latest Wednesday of next week.
Any board members have any questions? This is Robin. I actually just wanted clarification. In one of the slides, it said COVID. I just wanted to clarify what that acronym was for.
Oh, yeah. So COVID is the Community Office of Business Inclusion and Diversity. It is a state certification. So it is your, you may also heard of DMWES, Division of Diverse Contractors, Minority Contractors, Women-Owned Women-Owned Business, Emerging Small Business, and Disadvantaged Veteran Business. So it's a state certification.
Okay, thank you for that. Go ahead, Bob. Bob, are you out there?
I am sorry, my computer died and then it went on mute, so I did tune out and come back. So sorry, I missed a little bit. So thank you for the presentation. That was really helpful. But two questions. One, I'm just curious about the site. I mean, you're up by Oxbow Park, farmland, and it seems like a big and I know this is water under the bridge, so maybe it's a moot, but I know I've heard questions about this. Why are we building out in this area where a big treatment plant of this scope seems very inconsistent with the land use patterns and so on? And two, as I mentioned, it got a little garbled right at the end. So I'm curious. You're going to council with with several reports, but is there a decision point right in front of us? Is there a place for the public to weigh in? I mean, what are the next big decisions that really have to be made as we move along this process, and what's still at play?
So
Jody, do you want to take that first question, and then I can answer the council question?
thanks. Yeah, so the Water Bureau had purchased this piece of property, which is an allowed use on the property. It is not exclusive farmland zoned. So we purchased this property because we anticipated something like filtration coming up in the future. I mean, most other utilities nationwide have been on filtration for decades. So this has been something that has been coming for a long time. The piece of property is fairly unique in the criteria that we need to be able to, it has access to our current conduits. So it is within proximity of the existing water system. That saves the community a ton of money and disruption, and also dollars for having to build on a site that is not near the existing piping system, which would be a huge disruption, particularly along some of the most populated or most congested thoroughfares like Division. It also needed to be at a specific elevation, and we wanted a piece of property that was large enough to be able to accommodate the facility as well as to provide some buffer around it from the community. So for all of those reasons, in 1975, this was a piece of property that met that criteria, and it was still an allowed use on the property. Which has been confirmed with land use approvals from both Multnomah and Hopkins County.
And then you had asked about what's coming to council on Wednesday on the 10th. So it's 3 actions. there is a report to council. It's just our annual report. So this is the one that was required in 2017. We've come through annually. It will be voted on by council to accept the report, and certainly testimony will be allowed, but it's just accepting or not accepting the report that we're required to bring. I think it'll be informational. A lot of the same information that you heard today will be in that, I think it's 5 or 6 page report, annual report. And then the 2 other reports to council, they are actionable. It is council, it's not a rubber stamp. Council will have to decide whether they want to accept those guaranteed maximum prices. This is for the balance of the work for both the filtration facility itself and for the pipelines. So they can determine, as Jody presented, there's a pretty compelling case to move forward. But if council doesn't see that case or wants to go in a different direction, understanding the trade-offs that will happen there, they certainly could. That will be a decision for council with staff presentation and also with testimony from the public. There will also be testimony from Oregon Health Authority. They'll weigh in on the way that they see the regulations. And then I believe some of the COVID contractors, the participants and subcontractors who would be doing some of this work will also be there to testify. So certainly the public is welcome on Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll throw it back to Karen. And then it looks like we might have a member of the public that wants to ask a question. So go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Robin. Karen Williams, voting member. I guess one more follow-up to my earlier questions. And I just would like a clarification on, again, kind of in layperson's terms, what adjustments to the capital plan means. Like, as an example, are we talking, so it made me think about this when I think Gabe, you used the word trade-offs, and not in this context, but are we talking about as an adjustment to a capital plan, say, just very simply like not doing other capital improvements because the cost of this project has been or will be so much more than was originally estimated? Is that kind of what an adjustment to the capital plan means?
Yes, for the most part, and I can give you even a little more specifics on what I guess trade-off we're making, primarily in 2 areas, Karen. One is we have a mains replacement program where we're out there replacing our mains to minimize main breaks, right? Pipes get old, so we need to be replacing them. We do have in our 10-year capital plan plans to step up on the replacement toward the end of the 10-year forecast. So what we have done with that is not do the step up of the replacement, but delaying that a few more years out. So that allows us to reduce that program within that 10-year window to help fund the increase. The other is in the area of seismic plan implementation. We have a goal to be implementing our seismic plan within 30 years. The state suggests 50. And we are now looking at implementing the seismic plan over a 40-year period. Again, well within the goal that we have set or that the state would like us to be doing. So that's what we're talking about when we say we are adjusting the CIP to accommodate for the increase to this project.
I appreciate those examples. That was really helpful, Cecilia. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so I just want to get a quick clarification from the member of the public calling from the phone number ending in 044. Do you have a question for the staff, or are you here for the public comment portion that you may have missed? And I think it's *9 to unmute. We'll give them a few more seconds in case they're fumbling with their phone a bit.
Correction, I think it's *6 to unmute if you're having difficulty.
All right, not seeing an unmute yet. We can wrap up the filtration update today. Thank you all for presenting and for answering questions. And if the person with their hand raised gets it figured out, please just message in chat and we will try to give you a moment. So then let's see what we've got here. All right, so with that, let us actually move on to the budget portion of today's work, where we are deciding, I believe, if we want to write a list of demands or a subsequent recommendation letter for the bureaus and city council around how we can navigate the bureaus better as pub members. And so because I did miss the last conversation, Amy, is there anything that you can add here?
Yes, thank you, Robin. Sorry, it's hard to get to the unmute sometimes. So just a reminder of where we are in the process. So this should look familiar to those of you who were at the last meeting. Just provides what the rates were approved at, the documents that you've received so far, the requested budgets, the analysis. We had asked if there were any outstanding questions, and I haven't received any directly. So if there's any clarification questions, if there's bureau staff that are available, they may be able to answer, or I can still try to get answers to those. There are listening sessions coming up this month. So those are open to the public and opportunities to speak directly. And the goal was, based on what was discussed at the last meeting, there was interest from pub members in kind of doing a final document that captures a few key areas. And what we had discussed was a goal of trying to get that submitted to the mayor and council before the mayor's proposed. And so these are kind of the key categories that were mentioned at the last meeting and that I provided to you in read ahead. So the suggestion was including any proposed investments that pub supports, some areas of concern, and the one that's listed there was one that was flagged during that meeting, and a statement of the appropriateness of rate increases and the basis for that. So at this point, the goal, at least that I had in mind for today's meeting, is to just kind of pinpoint down anything that you have that falls into any of these areas that you want to make sure are part of that final letter, so that we can work on drafting that and getting something for pub to finalize at their next meeting. So just wanted to open the floor for comments from folks to see where you wanted to go with that.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, you mentioned it, but I don't see it up here. I mean, council did invite us to give them our recommendations on how we could intersect better with the process. I think we should take them up on that.
Yes, that's a good point, Bob. I wasn't sure whether that you want as part of this letter or a longer conversation would be needed. So I guess I had made an assumption, and it may be an incorrect one, to have that be separate from this final letter, but it may make sense for it to all be together. We just haven't discussed much about what the process would look like. So if you think that that is achievable between this meeting and next meeting, then certainly we would want to include that in the final document.
I think that's a great question, and I don't know, but I think we should at least acknowledge it. If we can't make recommendations, I think we should make sure we have a couple lines in there that just say we appreciate the council's request for feedback on this, and we'll be providing that shortly or something like that, just so we don't lose it.
Great, thank you.
This is Robin. I would like to speak in favor of writing kind of what Bob said, where maybe we're throwing in a sentence or two saying that we will get to them, but I do like the idea of having, I'm going to call it our list of demands, which is just how we want to be engaged with and by the bureaus throughout the budget process. I do think it would be really helpful for us to craft a letter like that. I also feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be submitted immediately, and that it's mostly for this next round of processing, which is always going, but we can at least focus on our current recommendations and send a separate letter of how we want to navigate the budget going forward. And then I just wanted to make a comment. I do think we should really push the area of concern about environmental programs, because the community budgets office recent report that was sent out as a read ahead also backed up the claim that a lot of these environmental programs are going to be cut if there is limited funding, as well as cuts to those 8 trainee positions that we had successfully lobbied for and successfully funded last year, but now they're on the chopping block. I think that's a big issue. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, but I'm going to let Bob chat and then I'll bring it up as a second point.
Just to follow up on, thank you. Just to follow up on the environmental thing. I think there's 2 parts to the environmental issue. The first is the actual cuts. And the second is the statement that these are ancillary programs, that they're a lower priority for BES, because that's a new, I don't know, policy statement that to me came out of nowhere. And I think we should question that. And I think connected to that, we ought to be saying, we appreciate the conversation that's going on around a natural resource bureau or a natural resource unit. But for now, the Bureau of Environmental Services is the environmental bureau of record. And until these programs have a new place to go and these things are sorted out, I'm not being articulate here, but basically you can't start cutting them until we have a plan, because I think one of the dangers in this process that we're engaged in is that things are kind of being dismantled in one place before there's any new place to put them. So I mean, and I'm happy to work on some of that language if it's helpful.
Thank you for breaking that one down, Bob. And I kind of also wanted to comment on the appropriateness of the rate increases. If I'm understanding correctly, the bureaus have requested at least a 5% rate increase for the service development charges. And it has me, sorry, they've requested that rate. And it is to my understanding that the bureaus have essentially been paying for some of the cost to deliver rather than putting that on the businesses that receive our services. And so it has me wondering, essentially, like in the past 10 years, how much of the service delivery charges has the Bureau been paying and not been pushing onto for-profit businesses? And it has me thinking, should we be asking for a specific number for that percentage? I don't know if we have the background of knowledge for it, but it has me wondering if we've been essentially subsidizing some of those service delivery charges. We've been losing money for a minute now. And so it would be nice to know how much we've been subsidizing that. And is it necessary to now ask for a 10% increase to make up what we have been paying for and for what we've lost previously? Go ahead, Karen.
Robin, I'm sorry. I just wondered if I could ask you to restate your last question to us. I just didn't quite follow, and I didn't want the resounding silence to be an indication of lack of interest. I just didn't quite follow.
Okay, so to reiterate, it's my understanding that through the current service development charges, we have not been able to recoup the amount of investment that the bureaus have been putting in to make those connections. And so we are essentially letting the city bureaus pay for a portion of the service development charges instead of putting that onto the business and wholesale customers, if I'm stating that correctly. And so the bureaus are currently asking for at least a 5% SDC rate increase. And my question was to figure out, is there a way to see how much the bureaus have paid for those SDCs in comparison to how much they have recouped from the businesses or wholesale clients that use them? And should we be specifically requesting a specific percentage? Because they're asking for at least 5%. Do we have the power, authority, or knowledge to be asking for a specifically higher percent in order to recoup the funding that we have previously paid for on behalf of business interests? Go ahead, Amy.
So I might call on Cecilia, who's in the room, and might be able to answer more clearly. Just for point of clarification, my recollection is that, well, first of all, that council did approve the SDC rates at the 5% rate. So that is the rate that was approved. So at this point, it couldn't be at a different rate than what was approved, but they can correct me if I'm wrong. Now, I think kind of what gets to the point of what you were questioning, Robin, is that last year they had asked for an increase to SDCs, but SDCs council froze. And so they did not increase SDCs last year. And that may have happened in other years as well. But that is the one that I recall, and it's the most recent one. So the rate increase that would have been due last year is what was lost over this past year. So I'm not sure if they have a sense of what that impact was. But Cecilia, correct me if I'm wrong, or add anything that you think might address Robin's question.
Yeah, thanks. I think, Robin, what I'm understanding you to say is that perhaps our rates are not at full cost recovery for permits and installation. And when they're not at full cost recovery, essentially the water rates are, the income that's coming in is subsidizing those revenues. As a result, that's, is short. That is only, and as Amy mentioned, last year, our fees and other charges were increased to full cost recovery. The only thing that was held unchanged was the SDC. And is SDC also, at any time that it's not if we're not able to charge at the rate that we need them to be, then development is being subsidized by our ratepayers. So we do have 1 year where we fell behind on SDCs. This year, we only asked for a 5% increase to our fees and other charges. We have not done the actual calculation of what the increase would have been at full cost recovery. And of course, it also depends on the volume of work that we're receiving. So you're right that we're falling behind as a result of what we have went to council with this year. And that was also something that we have mentioned to council during the rate hearing, was that as we start to fall behind, we do need to catch up at some point. And we would like to be able to catch up at some point. Karen, does that help with what I think, Robin?
This is Robin. That does help. I was wondering, do you, not necessarily on the spot, but do you have in the near future the ability to provide us with a calculation of that full cost recovery?
Yes, we can do that. I will need some time to work on having those calculations completed. And of course, that would be water, and then you know, I don't want to speak for BES. They will need to do the same.
All right, thank you. And yes, I would like to put that request out there unless someone else is really against that. Because I think it would help us with those line by line items as we navigate how to equitably navigate the budget. So with that, I will stop chatting. Is there anyone else that has any recommendations, areas of concern that they would really like noted in this, what I believe is our final budget recommendation before the adopted budget? Let's go to Alexis and then Karen.
Hi, Alexis, voting board member. I just wanted to second or reemphasize that Bob's suggestion for us mentioning that other request about improved processes and mentioning in this letter that we are aware of that and that we will be following up separately. But I think my suggestion would be that for this letter, we keep it focused on these budget recommendations and just allude to the fact that we are aware of that and we'll be following up. And if possible, it would be great if we could agree on a date or a deadline for ourselves so that they know when to expect that. I don't know if, you know, end of May to give us a few meetings to be able to discuss makes sense.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Karen.
Right. Just forgot what my question. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Robin, for reiterating the conversation about the SDCs, and I appreciate you restating that for me. And I just agree. I do think it is a really important line of inquiry to understand, you know, how lack of, you know, perhaps raising SDCs high enough to cover the true cost of development. I'm totally behind like inquiring more into that. So thanks for that. My question was about the I wanted to make sure I was understanding the analysis from the city budget office. And particularly around the example that I'm remembering is around the Water Bureau budget. And I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately, but my recollection was it said something like the cost savings or the reductions that the Water Bureau had proposed, like I think moving the water fountain maintenance, I believe, to general fund, and not quite remembering what the second item was. But am I correct that the city budget office analysis basically sort of said, well, that's not going to quite cover it because those cost savings won't be realized in this budget. So therefore, the Water Bureau needs to do additional cuts. And that's where we're looking back again at the 8 apprentice positions and a couple other items. Am I interpreting that CBO analysis correctly?
Maybe I can jump in to help answer that question if that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so we understanding that we will need to be absorbing the city transition cost, we came up with some proposals on how we could be doing that, and that's a direction that we got from the city budget office. One of the proposal that you were hitting on is fountain maintenance. We currently have an interagency with Parks Bureau to maintain the decade fountains. And our proposal was to have that funded by general fund. And that allows us about $900,000 of savings that could be used for any additional costs related to city transition that we would have to absorb. I believe CBO's analysis indicated that due to lack of general funds available, that's likely not to happen. So our other options, which includes eliminating positions, would need to be considered for making up the cost of transition that will be communicated to us as part of the mayor's proposed budget.
And Karen Williams, again, quick follow-up, is that still yet to be decided? I mean, we still don't know what the transition costs are going to be. So for the time being, that's an uncertainty we kind of have to live with. Is that my understanding?
Yes, so yes, that's correct. The mayor will be making decisions on the cost for city transition, and that information will then get calculated and allocated to the bureaus. We'll receive that information, and at that time we'll be able to, we'll be informed of how much we need to be absorbing, and that will be part of the mayor's budget. So essentially, yeah, to your point, we are in a holding pattern until we get that information.
Any other questions or concerns about the budget process and our recommendations? Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Sorry, just to sort of finish that thought there, then I might suggest then putting this sort of uncertainty around city transition costs. Just, I mean, for me, that's an area of concern. I don't think there's nothing that we can do about it right now, and I'm not, suggesting that it's a bad thing that that there are costs associated with transitioning to a different form of government, but it does seem like that uncertainty, I mean, that will have real effects on real positions and people's jobs. It sounds like, and we just don't quite know how much at this point. And yeah, for me, that's an area of concern. Like I said, I don't know that it's something that anybody can do anything about at this point, but seems like we should sort of flag that. That's something fairly unique to this year's budget that is, again, we'll have a real effect on people's jobs and the ability to provide certain services and opportunities for people, right? That would be my only addition I can think of right off the top of my head.
All right, so with that, I think, yep, gonna want to finalize our recommendations. Is anyone available to volunteer, maybe one or two board members to assist Amy in crafting these finalized recommendations in between now and the next meeting?
I did hear Bob volunteer just for that piece, so I will follow up with you directly about making sure that we have some language that lines up with what you've stated and incorporate that related to the environmental pieces. So if I have questions like that for anybody else, I will follow up, but certainly if there's anybody else who wants to help in the overall drafting, let me know.
This is Robin. I can definitely throw some assistance into that as well.
And there's Bob, me as well.
This is Heather.
And
I would be happy to help as well.
I have a question related to the suggestion that I was discussing, the SDCs. If council has already locked in the 5% rate, is this still a place? Is this letter still a place where we could say that we are interested in what those estimates for full cost recovery are in order to navigate going forward?
You could, although I don't know that that's necessary. I think the bureaus we can follow up with directly. They've both indicated that they can provide some information related to that. So we can work on that. Council, I mean, really the concern is about a decision council already made last year, right? So you can still state, and perhaps I can craft something to put in the letter just that acknowledges that that happened and that it's a concern, you know, moving forward, regardless of what the specific numbers are of what's lost, but that it's an ongoing concern into the future and making sure that, you know, development is paid for by those who are impacting the system.
Okay, yeah, that works for me. All right, so it looks like we got a handful of volunteers. Thank you all. And then let me find my annotated thing. I think we just have a little bit of announcements. So you should have received some read ahead about administrative rules being updated with BES. I believe the information is open and available between April 1st and May 1st, and that there should be 3 public comment portions. I think that's what I have on my calendar. I have Wednesday, April 10th, Saturday, April 13th, and then Monday, April 15th. Are those the 3 dates for this one?
No, those are for I believe those dates that you just listed are the listening sessions. I can double check on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry about that, guys.
Those are the listening sessions budget. So this is just the public comment period. And so if there's questions in looking at the materials that you have for the Bureau, certainly send those my way, because if you want to discuss anything to provide during the public comment period, then we can prioritize that for the next agenda. So just wanted to flag and make sure that you saw the message that went out. Certainly reach out to me if you have specific questions for BES, and or to let me know if you want time dedicated to it at the upcoming meeting.
Then we have an ARC meeting coming up next week, 1 week from today, I do believe, that we still need a volunteer for. So if you have availability in the morning hours of next Tuesday, April 9th, please send an email to Amy or shout into the void currently while we're all here.
And thank you to Joanne. I'm not sure if she's still here, but as your ex officio is able to cover that if there's no community member that can cover it. So Joanne will be stepping in for that meeting if needed.
Thank you, Joanne, for volunteering. Julia?
Remind me of the date.
It's April 9th.
What's it there on the screen? I'm sorry, right. I feel like I had a conflict, but I will double check. Oh yeah, no, I can't do it. Sorry.
Thanks for trying.
Right. And then my aforementioned dates, it does seem relevant. So those are the proposed budget listening sessions that we have the ability to attend, maybe like as individuals, if we wanted to give our opinion. Do we see any need to be there as a collective? Not seeing any hand raises, but I just want to say that those dates could be an opportunity, at least if anyone is free, to try to listen in virtually to see what the community is saying to better form our opinions on them. But other than that, I just wanted to say with the next meeting, it might be actually good for us to spend some of the April 18th meeting writing down, trying to formulate that letter that Commissioner Mapps requested about how Pub wants to be engaged throughout the process. Like, what are our demands? What are our expectations? And how do we believe that we can be better utilized in order to represent the public and just to be more knowledgeable? Because the previous issue has just been that we're consistently engaged way too late in the game. whereas the creation of the Portland Utility Board was to really be there in the nitty-gritty of it throughout the year, engaging the budget, and even being mindful that we might want to see if we have the capacity to seek like more outside resources when it comes to just budget knowledge and work, as I, for one, mostly have my budget experience through this board. But I just want to throw that in the ring. And it also looks like we're going to have a ... We're going to have one of those natural resources service projects meetings on Friday, April 12th. I will try to be available for that. So I'll put my name down for that. But other than that, are there any final announcements from the board before we sign off for the day? All right, so not hearing anything, we've got our April 18th meeting at 11 a.m. and then May 7th at 3:30 p.m. Thank you all for coming today, and meeting adjourned.